Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Salvos Parenting Conversation. I'm Tatjana Simakova, psychotherapist, a parent, and a founder of this page. And I am so delighted to be sitting down today with someone whose voice and work I deeply admire, Laura Crowley. Laura is an autism consultant, author, and lecturer with over 25 years of experience. And she is also the founder of Connect of Clarity Clinic. She brings a powerful combination of professional insight and lived experience. Having been diagnosed as autistic in adulthood and as a mother to two children, one neurodivergent and one neurotypical. Her work is grounded in both personal and clinical reality. If you have downloaded any of the incredible free guides in our community, like the power of stimming, understanding empathy, or coping with change, then you already know Laura's work. Today, we are going to explore the thinking behind those resources and open up some important conversations around parenting, neurodiversity, and what support really means. Laura, thank you so much for being here today. Can you share a little bit about your journey, both personally and professionally, and what led you to create Connect to Clarity Clinic?
Oh, good morning, and thank you so much for such a gorgeous introduction. It's lovely to be here and lovely to speak to all the people in your community. So my name is Laura. I have been in autism services since I was about 19. I worked in a preschool at that age when I was in college, and there was one little boy who was autistic, and that's kind of where my interest was tweaked. But from there, I've worked in a multitude of settings, everything from early intervention, home tuition, residential care settings, autism-specific schooling. And then I worked for a charity for 19 years. I lectured in UCC for 10 years on interventions and supports across the lifespan on the autism diploma, and I was one of the founding members. And I've been in private practice now for going on 12 years, actually, since September. So it's been a very varied career. But I guess the real work for me, the most meaningful work I've ever done, started after my eldest was born. And I quickly realized that she was likely autistic. I mean, I had inklings from when she was about 8 weeks, 7 weeks. So when we came to the realization that she was likely autistic, it was then lockdown. And I was working with two children under 3, and a lot of realizations had come to the fore. I suffered a breakdown after the birth of my second baby. I now recognize it as severe autistic burnout, but then it was classed as postnatal depression. I went on a kind of a journey of discovery, and it was actually a lady who is an autistic author, Jennifer Cook. You might know her from Love on the Spectrum. She's the dating person,
Yes,
supporter. It was Jennifer was actually visiting, and I know Jennifer a long time, and she visited my home and we were sitting, and she actually gave me a copy of her book, and she asked me, she said, I think you should do the chick list. And the chick list is like a list of female traits, autistic traits. And it was in lockdown that I read that book, and then I booked my assessment. So I celebrate my Autie birthday on the 12th of August every year. And so I've had 5 Autie birthdays, and my daughter then was identified after that when she was 4 years and about 6 months. So yeah, that's kind of been the journey to date. It's been a very convoluted one, but I think the most meaningful work I've ever done. It's amazing.
What a journey. You had interest in autism way before, from very young age. And then your own child was diagnosed with autism, and after you were diagnosed with autism yourself. What was it like receiving your autism diagnosis as an adult? And maybe how did that reshape how you understood yourself and your past?
I think for me, growing up unidentified autistic, and I always say I was identified because it's very much I was always autistic, we just figured it out.
Mm.
Um, for me, it's kind of like growing up, I felt very broken. I felt like I lagged behind everyone, and almost I joke that everyone else had the manual and I got left out. So for me, knowing then that I was just operating on a different system meant that I was no longer broken. I was a whole person. I just operated differently. So I've never been mentally stronger or mentally healthier than I am now. And it has been absolutely transformative for me.
You mentioned that you were growing up almost feeling like there is no manual for you and how to handle life. But now that you have your own child who is a neurodivergent, but you also have a neurotypical child.
Mhm.
And how has been a parent of both a neurodivergent and a neurotypical child shape the way you view parenting and support your children
Okay,
yourself?
that's an interesting question because I always say that my autistic child is easier to parent because I understand why she does
Okay.
all the things she does. But I think, I always make the point when I give autism awareness talks that, the world is not full of Johnnies and Joannes. We're not all the same, regardless. And just like autistic people aren't Johnnies and Joannes either. So even in parenting my autistic child, she's not exactly like me. She has a sensory profile that differs from mine. She loves to make lots of noise, and I'm very noise sensitive. So there can be clashes and stuff in that respect as well, particularly past 6 o'clock when my battery just goes down. I get more sensitive to noise and more of my sensitivities come out. So I think there's challenges regardless of neurotype when you're parenting.
Of
And
course.
while it almost is easier for me to parent a neurodivergent child because that's what I understand and that's where my training is, my professional experience is, and my personal experience is, no two kids are going to be the same anyway. So there are elements of the neurotypical experience in parenting that are easy for me.
Mhm.
And then there are elements of the neurodivergent parenting that is easy for me. But parenting full stop isn't easy, right? Like regardless.
It's not.
So, so it's up and down and left and right, depending on the day you ask me. You can ask me tomorrow, and I would say, oh my God, my neurotypical child was an absolute dream today, and we had a great day. Then you could ask me Wednesday, and I go, no, me and my neurotypical child just don't get each other today. So I think regardless of neurotype, parenting has its challenges. But I
Mm.
think the one thing that for me, my training has meant that I look past, I suppose, the visible behaviors and I look more to what's underneath those behaviors. And I think that's probably part of the unique profile of the training I've had and the experiences I've had.
Hey, Laura, it's very interesting. And very often we talk about how to parent a neurodivergent child, but very rarely we talk about a parent who is autistic and has children, and I think is going through more challenges, such as noise, which is, I believe, very challenging. My partner is. He's not fully diagnosed yet, but there is a suspicion that he is autistic. He's going through
Mhm.
the diagnosis at the moment and through all the forms and questionnaires, and he finds it really difficult, the loud noises. And
Mhm.
as we know, children can't avoid not scream at times and not to kind of go wild. So,
Mhm.
how do you manage that aspect of your parenting?
Okay, that's a good question. So, one of the most famous phrases about autism is autism plus environment equals success. And that's from Luke Bearden, who's a professor in Sheffield University in the UK. So, in order for me to be the best that I can be, my environment needs to suit me as well as possible. So, one of the things that we do, I spend a lot of time in our kitchen. And one of the things that I do is we have a lot of soft furnishings to try and absorb the noise in the kitchen.
Okay.
Okay. But after 6 o'clock, if I'm still in the kitchen, because I'm going to be doing cleanup and prep and all those things, the kids, so the kids leave and then they go to their area, which is the playroom, which has everything that they need to suit their needs, which is like my daughter has a swing, there's a trapeze, there's a climbing frame. So she has her sensory area. I have
Mhm.
my sensory area. So I suppose that's one of the things we do. The other thing is when we're getting to a certain level, I say, right, if you need to make that noise, you're just going to need to make it in a different room because mommy's in this
Okay.
room and I have to be here because I'm cooking dinner or cleaning up or whatever.
Hmm.
I can't move. So I think we're very honest with each other about the practicalities of our sensory differences. And we talk to each other, and I talk, mummy's ears get more sensitive as the day goes on and my battery goes down. And she understands that now. So we talk in very frank terms with each other, I think is the beauty of
Hmm.
that openness. And that's partly how I deal with it. If I can leave the room, I go to the back room, which is very cocooned and noise cancelling. And I
Hmm.
think we've created spaces within our home that suit our different needs. And that's probably the easiest way I can say that we've dealt with that problem.
That's amazing. Because my partner, again, talking from experience, he does his own corner where he can retrieve and have his peace and quiet while I'm at kids and the noisy evenings and as they go wild. Um, is there any, and that is on the side question, maybe, is there any, maybe, some children would wear noise cancelling headphones. Is there anything for adults?
Yeah, loops. So I would wear loops if I'm going to like Mahon Point or anywhere, thing like that. Even though I lost my pair at the moment, I need to order another pair. But loops, and the other thing I do is if I'm in a situation where the noise is too much, I hum because humming will activate my vagus nerve, will help my body go into rest mode, but it also cancels out the external noise that's coming in,
Okay.
and I can take control over the noise that my brain is getting. So I'll hum a favorite song to try and cancel out. So I produce output to cancel input.
Well, that's amazing. That's a very handy tip.
And a lot of
What
kids who are high volume, that is what they're doing. They're creating output to stop the unpredictable
do
input.
you think your neurotypical child understand what you might be going through at times?
We have some really, she's only 6, she's nearly 7. We have some
Okay.
very big conversations about being autistic. But given that her older sister is autistic and her mum is autistic, she has cried about not being autistic. I mean, that's the kind of household we live in. So, like she just wants to be the same.
Like mom.
Yeah, she wants to
Yes.
be the same. So when things happen that she doesn't understand, I try to put it in ways that she will understand. So I try to make it as
Mhm.
concrete for her as I possibly can, using examples from her life, and I'll try and equate it to something.
Okay. It's very interesting, Laura, because and maybe we can do another live around that, around how an autistic parent or what they can do to kind of to be more proactive of their children, to
Mhm,
soften their experiences
mhm,
of loud noise, and how to talk to their children maybe that about autism and about maybe special I don't want to say needs, but maybe special
individual needs.
adjustments,
Yeah.
individual needs, yeah, for their parent, that they're not just like any other parent. And I find it fascinating, and I would like to have a deeper conversation
Mhm,
around that
mhm. That's no problem.
at some point. So maybe if you don't mind, we will move to your work and what you do,
Mhm,
and to understanding autism through a neuroaffirmative lens. So you use the term neuroaffirmative a lot in your resources.
mhm.
What does that really mean to you?
Um, so I think for me, neuroaffirmative means moving from fixing to understanding. And I think for a long history, I used to lecture on the history of autism and kind of the history of interventions. And for the longest time, our focus has been on fixing. The neuroaffirmative or the neurodiversity movement is towards acceptance and towards understanding. And that's the biggest difference. It's about not
Mhm.
seeing the person as a problem to be fixed, but rather a person as whole
Okay.
and an individual in their own right, and their unique profile to be
Mhm.
celebrated. So my work would center around helping children, teens, even some adults to understand themselves as a whole, not as something that is less than a neurotypical person, but rather to understand that their life is perfectly as it is. It's just different. They have different strengths, different challenges, and understanding that, not something to be fixed, but to understand their differences and build upon them using their strengths.
Okay, I like your approach, Laura, and it sounds amazing. Why do you think why is it so important that we shift away from this fixing or deficit-based language when talking about autism?
Oh, I think
Mhm.
language has huge power. And one of the first slides I do whenever I do any training is one that says building blocks and it says language. And I always say language informs how we feel about ourselves. So the language that we use when discussing children or speaking to children is how they will then feel about themselves. And I always go back to when I was in junior infants and my maths teacher, they were giving out awards and stuff. And I was really getting really upset because I didn't think I was going to get one. Now I still remember this. This is 40 years ago. And he said, don't worry, when we get to maths. And he gave me an award for maths. And he told me, he was like, you have a maths brain. You have a fabulous maths brain. Now, I don't know if I do, but I ended up doing honors leaving cert maths. His language around my capabilities when I was that small informed my school career around maths. I did very well in maths. I did honors paper and I got a
Amazing.
B1 in honors paper, but I thought I should have gotten an A2. So if we think about that in that small way, and then we think that when we talk about deficits, we teach people to see what's wrong. Okay. And I always say, rather than what's real, if we can reframe deficits as differences, then we're talking about what's real in a person. It's not something that's less than or wrong. It's
Mm.
just different than your typical person. So, for instance, one of my differences is in how I communicate. I'm very direct and I'm very straightforward and I'm very honest. If we take that from a deficit perspective, people would say, well, she lacks the ability to filter her communication style according
Mhm.
to the audience and the tone. Whereas there's nothing wrong with my communication style, it's just different than typical. And I favor honesty. So
Yes.
when we're talking in terms of language and we're looking at like deficit language, deficit fuels shame, it fuels the concept of othering. And then when we're talking about affirmative language, it allows people to develop identity pride. So it allows people to affirm that they are a whole person. They're just different.
That's true. Absolutely. Like all of us,
Mm-hmm.
aren't we? We're all different and we all have different abilities, whether we are neurotypical or neurodivergent. And the importance to find that, what we're good at and grow that part of us, so grow that side of us is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you wish more professionals and parents truly understood about supporting autistic teens, especially during the emotionally charged years?
Okay. So I genuinely think that the teen years are really akin to that I have a tattoo here on my wrist and it's of a lotus. And I think the teen years is very representative of a lotus because lotuses grow in dark, muddy places. And I think the
Hmm.
teenage years are so dark and muddy for a lot of people. But there is beauty to be found in that growth. But what we have to understand is a lot of teens mask the dark, murky stuff, and they can mask that chronic stress that they experience in those teenage years. I mean, this isn't only neurodivergent kids, this is all
Everything,
teenagers.
yeah.
Okay. So I guess that it's for me, it's actually that feeling of they look like they're coping. Sure, Johnny is grand or Joanne is grand, can actually be masking that more chronic stress that they're under. And that while they're growing through this mud, unfortunately, it is having a huge effect on them. So what we see is not often the truth under the surface.
That's true. And I actually see that quite a lot, where a parent would come and say, yeah, she or he is fine, and the week was great, and then the teen comes and they have a completely flipped side of the week that they have experienced. So they are masters of hiding that mud and what they're struggling with. So would it be to look behind that mask a little bit more often
I think it's
for
maybe,
parents?
I think for me, it's maybe that conscious curiosity in really relaxed form. It's taking the time to sit and listen to the really small stuff. Because when they feel that you listen to the really small stuff, they know that you'll have a more open to the bigger, harder, more involved stuff. So
Absolutely.
my kids are only 6 and 8, but I work with a lot of teens. And one thing that I do at the very start when I'm getting to know them is I just sit and listen to them talking about their special interests, because I want them to know that I hear them, regardless if we're talking about music or we're talking about disordered eating. I want them to know that my ears are open and I'm actually listening, actively listening to what they're saying. And that starts with the small stuff.
And I would be with you on this. A lot of teenagers come back and they ask me to talk to parents, and instead of trying and fix the situation and jump in with, you need to do this, with advice and all of that, just to sit down and listen and be there for their children, for their teenagers. It's amazing how a little bit of being open to listening can change the whole dynamic of the relationship. So, and that brings us to the next part, is the communication, empathy, and emotional regulation. In your worksheets, you explore the difference between autistic and neurotypical communication. And can we talk about that in real life terms? What kinds of mismatches or misunderstandings often happen?
So I think you'll notice even from my communication with you, my eye contact drifts a lot. I don't like to stare at the screen because that makes me more stressed and it drains my energy. So I think one of the things about true autistic communication is we don't value eye contact. You're more likely to get more out of us if we're not making eye contact. For instance, I keep something with me all the time to help me regulate, especially if I have to sit still and concentrate. But I think that one of the biggest misconceptions about autistic communication is that we lack certain skills. And in truth, it's the double empathy problem that was proposed by Milton, who was a psychologist. And he basically said that two people who don't share a neurology and don't share the same experience of the world will have difficulty empathizing and communicating with each other because they're coming at things from a different perspective. So autistic communication is very direct and very straight, and we don't love small talk. We'd much rather a deep and meaningful conversation. So I can struggle when people first meet me with the small talk, but ask me about like something meaty and I get very animated and I talk at length. But I think many of those miscommunications come from the cross neurotype communication. So it's when I talk to somebody who isn't autistic, they may kind of go odd. I think that the reason I talk about it is so much is because a lot of the difficulty that we have in terms of when neurotypes meet up, different neurotypes, is that we don't understand each other. And autistic people find it hard to communicate with non-autistic people equally as much as non-autistic people find it hard to understand autistic people. And it's that kind of divide, which appears like we lack skills when we don't make small talk, or we're not making eye contact, or I need a fidget. That to us is just us being true to our communication style. And then it looks wrong, or it looks different when it's just how we best communicate.
I hear you, Laura, but on that I can understand, because I would be the one who avoids the small talk as well. And I hear better when I look aside, even though going through psychotherapy school, we were told, you need to keep the eye contact to
Mhm.
make sure that the other person feels listened. But I do, in my own practice, I know that for sure, I do kind of go away to listen,
Mhm.
because I hear better if I
Mhm.
don't look at the person straight directly into their eyes.
I have some
Um,
teens who come in and lie on the couch and stare out the window, and that's how we do our entire session. And we can do brilliant work then,
Amazing.
because there's no communication like stressors. They're communicating in the way that suits them,
Yes,
and I'm communicating in a way that suits me, and I'm there to listen to them. So I think it's about sometimes just understanding that just because it looks different doesn't mean it's wrong.
absolutely. Absolutely. And the empathy guide that you wrote is a favorite of mine. I went through obviously all of them, and it really challenges some of my own assumptions.
Mhm.
I suppose. What inspired you to write it?
My passion around the empathy work, I think, comes because the myth that autistic people lacked empathy has done so much harm to the community. And realistically, what it actually is that we don't lack empathy. In truth, it's often more intense. It's just that we show our empathy differently. And actually, this is a really good tip for parents. Um, is one
Mm,
way that autistic people show empathy is that if you tell a story and say, my granny passed away. An autistic person is likely to say, my uncle passed away last year. And now to the neurotypical people, that might look, oh, there's Johnny again taking over the conversation, making it all about him.
okay.
But the reality is that Johnny is showing, I get you, I see you, I know how painful that is. And this is me empathizing with you. So if you do have an autistic
Okay.
teenager and you're looking for them to open up about anything, one way to start is to tell them a story about your own experience in that and say nothing. They may say nothing in the moment, but maybe 2 days later they might say,
Okay.
that's happened to me, because that they'll want to empathize with your experience. And it's a really powerful tool. And it goes against everything you're taught in like any sort of counseling or anything like that to tell personal stories. But it is the one thing that will get autistic teens to come out with their own experience, to empathize with you, because that strong need to empathize comes out. And it might not look like telling you, I'm
Mm,
so sorry for your loss, or, do you want a hug or anything like that? But it'll be in their experience that they'll share it. So I think for me, I wrote the guide because I wanted to see empathy not as performance, but as presence,
mhm.
because that's what it's about. It's not a performance, it's about presence. And it's about just because it's shown differently doesn't make it wrong.
Amazing. You actually put into words what I've been thinking, and you explained it so simple and so easily. I am going to take this into my toolbox when sitting in front of a neurodivergent child. I'll definitely keep that in mind, Laura. Thank you. Uh, Um, what about when a child or teen is in meltdown? And we know it's not something they can control.
Mhm.
Sorry. What's your go-to strategy as a professional to support them in that moment?
So I think it's really important to frame meltdowns as what they are. And meltdowns are a neurological storm. It's a sensory storm. You have little or no control over your reactions or your actions at that point. And that's a really important thing to understand. It's not acting out.
Mhm.
it's completely out of control, and kids will say and do things in those moments that are out of character, and it's not willful. But my thing is always is that in that moment, logic will not land. It just won't land. It's not possible.
Mm.
Safety will. So we reason, regulate first and reason later. So co-regulation is our go-to at that point, and trying to lend them your calm. We can talk about how we got there much later on. But in
Yes.
that moment, they do not have capacity for reason. They do not have capacity for conversation or, any sort of reasoning. So we regulate first and reason later.
Can we talk a little bit about steaming and burnout?
Hmm.
Um, the power of steaming.
Hmm.
It's such a strong and such needed resource. Why do you think steaming is still so widely misunderstood, even in schools and professional settings?
So there's a really famous quote from Donna Williams, and I think it was from like 1996. And she said, autism from its inception, from the very moment someone came up with the word autism, has been viewed from the outside looking in rather from the inside looking out. So we've always looked at autism in terms of what's different, what's wrong, what's deficit, what needs to be
Mm.
fixed, rather than seeing it from the internal experience of the individual. And what we know about stimming is that everyone stims. So stimming is short for self-stimulatory behavior. So anybody who
Okay.
crosses their legs and jumps their leg under the table, or who chews the inside of their cheek, who bites their nails, who drums on the table, who twiddles with their hair, or like, just like is constantly at an earring. That's all stimming. That's any behavior that you do with your body in order for it to feel calm and regulated. Stimming for autistic people is just like that, except it's slightly different in that the actions are often bigger and more obvious and more unusual than for the autistic or neurotypical population. So
Mm.
stimming in itself is self-regulation, it's expression, and it's sometimes to show joy. So that's where it differs, I think, from the neurotypical population. Um, and when I first was introduced to stimming, it's when I worked in a school. I was like 22. I worked in a school for 3.5 years. And part of it is we had to stop stimming or find alternatives to stimming. And we didn't know
Oh,
then
okay.
that what we were doing was incredibly harmful, because when you
Yeah.
stop stimming, what you're actually doing is you're stopping a person's ability to regulate their own nervous system. And that's really damaging. There's huge trauma that's
Mm.
involved in that. And I think I wrote that resource as a way to come full circle from that original training that took place like 22 years ago. And it for me, it's really important that we help adults to understand that just because a behavior looks different
Hmm.
doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's
Yes.
bad or we should stop it. So just because it looks different doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's bad. It's actually a way that your child can be the best that they can be in the environment they're given. Because we go back to autism plus environment equals success. If you notice the child is stimming much more in certain settings, it's likely that that setting isn't suiting their sensory system and they're trying desperately to reset their own nervous system using that stimming.
Okay. How interesting how people try to put um, the children or adults who were stimming and it wasn't appropriate maybe or acceptable as normal
Mhm.
because we all have, as you mentioned, those habits. I find myself rocking a little bit now and again. But because I'm not going very violently rocking,
Mhm.
right? It's normal. It's acceptable.
Mhm.
But and people were trying to put them into a box of what is acceptable in the society.
It still goes
The,
on
the,
though.
the civil,
People still
it still
contact
goes on.
me looking to know, like, how do I get rid of that? How do I get rid of
Oh,
that?
yeah. What does healthy self-regulation actually look like in autistic children, especially in teens? And maybe Laura, if you can talk about a little bit about how can we as adults support that without correcting them?
Okay. So I think just like, the world isn't full of Johnnies and Joannes, we're all individuals and everybody's own best self-regulation is going to look different. The way I regulate is going to be different than the way my daughter regulates, even though we're both autistic.
Yeah.
But because we have different sensory profiles, we have different internal needs, we have different hormonal cycles, and they will all impact how we regulate, what we need, what our bodies need. But I think it looks different for every child and teen. It could be bouncing, humming, it could be pacing, it could be retreating, it could be repeating. It is different for every single child. Our job um isn't to stop stimming or stop, those self-regulation practices that the child finds that work. Like I have one gorgeous client who, when she comes in from school, she has an L-shaped couch and she bounces on the L-shaped couch and her mum is like, that works. She's a much happier, healthier child if she gets 20 minutes of that when she comes in. And she said for the first
Mm,
time when she did it, she was like, my couch, my couch. And she's like, my couch is going to be ruined. But she
mm,
very quickly caught on that, okay, this works. I can't replicate that using any other equipment. So we're just gonna, we're gonna let this fly. And I think our job isn't to stop it, but to provide safe, accessible ways to meet their needs and also to provide yes spaces. So for instance, my daughters have a yes space, which is their playroom. And that
mm,
has everything that they could need sensory wise. It has crash landing big bean bags. It has gymnastics mats. It has a swing. It has, and we did all this very reasonably. We didn't buy into the big sensory equipment, but that's their yes space. If they want to jump from the top of um, the Swedish ladder down onto the
mm.
crash mat, there is stuff to support that. And I don't
Yes.
legislate that space. That's where they can provide their own regulation, whatever that looks like. And I think that's important as well. Um, and I think teaching kids through co-regulation, through being that emotion coach of like inquiring with curiosity as to how they're feeling and what is driving what they need is really, really important. And again, that conscious listening of,
Mm,
like just the curiosity of, I'm wondering, why is it that you need to chew on that scarf all the time? I'm wondering, is there
mm,
something else? Could, with chewing gum, would that be a good? I'm just
mm.
wondering, that conscious curiosity is really important.
Yeah. And it does sound like it boils down to listening, curiosity, and acceptance, and maybe, thinking outside the box,
Mhm.
what is normal and what is acceptable.
There's a very famous phrase that says, normal is just a setting on a dryer.
Yes.
What's normal in my house is going to look completely abnormal in the next house. What's normal in their house will look abnormal to me. So it's take your child where they're at and
Yes.
work from there, and try not to look left and right to whoever the Joneses on the left and right and what they're doing with their child, because their child isn't your child. Your child has very individual needs, and we have to respect those individual needs and work at supporting, not fixing. And that's where neuroaffirmative care comes in, is where somebody says to me, like my daughter at the moment, she hates having her hair brushed. So we're coming at things from a different angle and we're trying to figure out where, well, if I blow dry it when we first wash it, then there's less
Mm,
knots and she's more likely. So I'm working with her rather than saying, absolutely not, your hair has to be brushed.
yeah.
I'm investing in products that will help her cope with it being brushed when it is. But then if it gets too knotty, we have ways of managing it so that we can still style it and make it look pretty, but then it has to be washed very quickly so that it doesn't matter. But we're just always looking at what works for her, what's her profile, what's she telling me, and what can I respect and work with. So again, looking at that curiosity of where is the problem lying and what can I
Mm.
do to support it rather than battling and railroading through it.
And what about autistic burnout, Laura?
Mhm.
Can you talk a little about what it looks like,
Mhm.
and what parents should look out for?
Okay. So I guess I was talking to a teacher about this recently, and I was trying to say that autistic burnout isn't going to the end of your battery. It's going to the end of your battery and keep going again and again and again. And it's getting to the point where it's not just your battery is low, but the whole system is affected. So autistic burnout is when you've basically pushed yourself beyond your limits excessively for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it can look different in everyone, but the main things you'll see is that when you rest, you still don't get recharged. You end up still as tired as you were. And the biggest one for me is that kids will lose their love of their special interests or the things that bring them joy. If you see a child who used to light up about something and they no longer light up, that's a huge alarm bell that
Mm.
nothing brings them joy. That's a big, big alarm bell for autistic burnout.
Okay, so they may stop going to their activities
Yeah.
or doing their favorite things.
Might even be gaming or like making videos or whatever it is that had previously brought them joy and they used to light up when they even thought about it.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And I think the
Mm.
other thing is regression of skills. So a lot of kids will retreat. They'll often confine themselves to one space. They won't want to interact. They don't have they can often lose the ability even to use their words and that. So it's different for everyone.
Okay.
One of the
Yes.
biggest signs for me that I'm heading for autistic burnout is it was my brain fog. My brain fog starts to go. And I notice that my eyes get tired even in the mornings when I wake up. My eyes are actually
Mm.
tired and I find it harder to focus.
So you figured out the symptoms to catch it early for yourself. And I suppose, is there any, how do you know, for example, with your daughter, those symptoms? Have you figured them out, or is it too early?
No, she does have signs. So for instance, when she comes in from school now today, we give her 40 minutes before I ask her anything. So I give her 40 minutes to just decompress. She gets 40 minutes of TV time, and I
Mm-hmm.
literally just place a snack on her lap with a drink, and I walk away and I leave her. So some of her signs are irritability because she's not an irritable child. Her need for alone time will go way up because she loves chatting. She loves talking about her special interests. So we see it in periods where, and when she does that, I leave her because I know that's what she needs. I'm not going to force her to interact with the family. But when she starts to retreat more and not want to go places, she might not want to leave the house at the weekend. Um, that's I leave her be. I'm like, that's what she needs. But again, we go in with that conscious curiosity of just giving her a connection on terms that she can cope with. So it might be
Mm-hmm.
that when she's watching TV, I literally just go in and snuggle beside her and I don't talk to her, but I let her know that I'm there and I'm if she wants me, and then I'll kind of dip in and out. But it's very much about leaving her take what she needs at that point. So there are signs for her, even though she's only 8, I can see those
Mm.
signs.
So really, we're looking for change
Hmm.
in their behavior, and then we need to stop and again listen and see what can be done
Hmm.
in that situation. And of course, for everyone, is going to be different. Those signs are going to be different.
Exactly. It's a very individual process. And one of the things I do with clients is I help them figure out what are my battery warning signs. So doing actually battery work with kids is really important. What are my battery warning signs? What might other people notice? What do I notice? One thing other
Mm,
people will notice is I cancel plans. I don't respond to text messages. I don't respond because I feel like my brain has enough going on.
mm,
So when you work with kids and you help them understand their energy, then helping them to communicate, well, you might notice this and I might notice this. So figuring out those kind of warning signs, just like you would, and we talk about them in terms of like your iPad or whatever, and we talk
mm.
about charging and would you be comfortable going out if your iPad was on like 40% and you knew you couldn't charge it for the day? Most kids are like, absolutely not. And I'm like, well, why do you do it to yourself then? We need to work on your charging and making sure you're the best that you can be.
Yes, absolutely. Um, in regard to supporting families, I think many parents, including in our community here, are still caught in what I call compliance mode. They are focused on controlling behavior, setting strict expectations, maybe, and doing what they think is best, but it's not working. What do you say? What do you say to a parent who is stuck in this kind of cycle, but wants to do better?
So the first thing I would say is that I understand that fear, because it's deeply rooted in love and a desire to help. And we often reparent our own kids the way we were parented. And oftentimes we were parented in a very strict manner,
Yes.
But control eventually disconnects. Collaboration builds trust.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, the reframe that I think is the most important one. So when we move away from like, how do I make them do it, to reframe of what's stopping them doing it, that's powerful. And just having that rethink around, right, rather than concentrating on making them, what's stopping them? And again, that type of curiosity instead of conflict. And that's at the heart of neuroaffirmative parenting. Is just because it's different to what you expect doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different.
Yes. And this small shift, I think, can make a big difference in how families connect with their autistic children. And maybe most importantly, how can we help parents understand that it is not their job to change their child, but rather to understand them? What would you say on that?
That shifted there. So I often say that understanding changes everything. So if we can just put on the little goggles and try and see it from an alternative perspective, we get that little insight into what it could be. That changes everything. So when parents stop trying to fix and start trying to connect, and that's why I called my business Laura Crowley Connect, because it's always been about connection and collaboration and building that trust. When a child feels seen and accepted for who they are, and not that somebody's trying to change them, growth will happen naturally. Relationships will change. Trust will flourish. And I think for me, acceptance is the most powerful intervention there is.
Yes,
But
I would agree with you.
Yeah, acceptance starts though with challenging all of that you've learned and absorbed about what autism is. Acceptance starts with seeing it as a difference rather than a deficit.
And with a bit of knowledge around it. Yeah. That's all very, very interesting, Laura. And I think there are a lot of tips that, I have learned from talking to you. And I'm sure our parents will draw something from it. Can you say a few words, Laura? What drew you to collaborate with Salvo's Parenting, and what stood out to you about this community and the families here?
I think when you put everything out there about the community, I think I loved that Salvus creates real safe space to explore teenhood with honesty. And that for me is because that's, I think, one of my core values. And I think I saw that in your community, and that for me was a large part of why I wanted to get involved. The compassion, the truth telling, and just the inclusion and the honesty. I think that for me, those are some of my core values. And I saw that reflected in your community. And that's why I personally wanted to be involved. And I think I really wanted to bring the autistic perspective, because when we include neurodivergent voices, everyone benefits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. because it is around us, it is in the community, and we need to talk about it. We need to talk more about it. And I am so delighted to have you on board, Laura. If you had just one message with the parents who are watching this, something they can carry with them today, what would it be?
Your child isn't behind. They're on their own timeline. They're becoming themselves. And your goal is not to make them typical. It's to make them well connected and proud to be them.
Amazing. I love it. I absolutely love it. Don't try and change them. They're beautiful as they are. Try and understand them. And lastly, are there any projects or upcoming resources that you're working on that we can look forward to?
So I'm currently working on an autistic energy theory resource that is going to just be really communicate all the messages around autistic energy and how to best envelop it and nurture it and help keep us out of burnout. And then also, if you have a child who is in burnout, to help them restore that energy base and while helping them recover, helping them to stay in recovery. And I'm also going to be working on a CPD training on the 3 C's, which is connection, communication, and comfort in working with and parenting autistic individuals. So it's a real passion of mine, actually. So there are 2 things that are coming up that I'm really, really excited about.
Sounds amazing, Laura, and I'm looking forward to seeing it and looking forward when those resources are out for the public. Thank you so much for being here, for your honesty, your clarity, and your compassion and what you do. Your work is reshaping how so many families understand and support their children, which is so important. And I know that for many in our community, your voice has been a source of calm and validation and hope. So keep doing what you're doing, and we will be sharing your resources, and we'll be talking to you again.